Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we got another Gun Gripe episode, except we've got Mike from Mrgunsandgear, yay, hanging out today. And, you know, we've been trying to get Mike onto some of the videos on the channel here just to do some cross-promotion. You'll be seeing my ugly mug on a few of his videos.
Absolutely.
So we've been kind of hanging out and doing some filming. We thought that it would be really fun to break apart a gun gripe and talk about very popular gun myths. Okay, now some of these gun myths we kind of just brainstormed and came up with some good ideas, and these are, some of them are constructive criticisms, and some of them are commonly perpetuated myths that are in many cases very incorrect. We're just going to kind of shotgun here and go down the list and talk about some of these. This is by no means all of them, because there's tons of different myths out there that are commonly erroneously perpetuated, but we're going to attempt to break apart some of the ones that we came up with together.
Right, and basically my thought behind this, I think 4 or 5 of those are mine, is questions or comments that I get from viewers all the time, like every day, multiple times. So we're going to get into it here.
Agreed. All right, so this one you came up with, and sure. I believe it's you know, it's a good one. The first one, AKs aren't accurate.
Sure. So I do a lot of AK content on my channel, and I think as we're filming this anyway, tomorrow I'm going to put up a video on an AK chambered in 7.62 by 3.9, and it was consistently shooting 5-shot groups with at 1.5 inches. So brass case ammo, good stuff. But the fact is, the AK itself, in terms of the design rather, can be very accurate. It absolutely can be. And then we have to discuss what is accurate, right? So what's your standard for accuracy? Is 2 MOA accurate? Is 1 MOA the only thing that counts, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail here in a second.
Sure.
But so what is accurate? You know, I think most AKs, the standard for them was 4 MOA from what I understand for different nations, but yeah, a lot of them will do a lot better than that if the shooter knows what he's doing, if the ammo works well in that gun, and of course environmental conditions are correct.
You know, a lot of times with these com block calibers, whether you're talking 7.62 by 39, whether you're talking 7.62 by 54 rimmed Russian, or any of those types of calibers, one thing that I've noticed is that the guns tend to shoot better with a bullet that is heavy for caliber. So like with 7.62 by 39, I'm a big fan of the 150 grain plus weight loadings. If you've got a good gun with a fast twist barrel that will stabilize some of the heavier projectiles, you'll probably find that your groups are going to shrink a good bit by switching to the heavier bullets. Nominal bullet weight on most of your AK rounds is going to be between 122 and 124 grains. Most of your 124 is kind of the standard for the way that those are approached, but I find that especially in AKs, a bullet that's heavy for caliber tends to do better. You got a longer bullet with more bearing surface, more weight. It just harmonically, that barrel settles into a much better harmonic signature with the heavier projectile. And AKs, a good way to improve accuracy is to shorten the barrel.
That's absolutely true.
Like if you have a 10.5 or maybe a 12-inch barrel on a AK-47 or AK variant, especially a 5.45, that short, rigid barrel is not going to have quite as many vibrations, and you're going to get much better accuracy.
Especially the way the gas block is, too, on those. So the closer you can get the end of that muzzle to the gas block, the more rigid and stable it'll be. And Eric touched on it a little bit, but caliber matters, too, right? So 5.45, in my experience, tends to be a little bit more accurate than the 7.62. Of course, that's across the board.
Oh, yeah.
Every gun's different, but across the board, that's
well, the reason that the 5.45 is intrinsically more accurate than the 7.62 by 39 when you compare apples to orange in terms of gun to gun, let's just say similar barrel length, similar configuration, is because that barrel's not whipping around as much. If you have the stock of the barrel being as thick as it is, and it's got a smaller hole in it, then guess what? It's going to be more rigid. You're going to get, you know, better harmonics in the barrel, and the gun is going to shoot better. Right. The 5.45 is a really well thought out round too.
It is.
So it uses what they call a square charge. If you're familiar with like 220 PPC or any of those types of calibers, if you like the way the charge sits in the case can affect the way that the powder burns, the initial start pressures you get, velocities. I mean, we're kind of getting off on a different tangent that may be out of the scope of why, okay, AKs aren't accurate, but there are a lot of factors. They can be accurate.
They can.
Absolutely. All right, so we're gonna run down the next one here. Number 2, runaway guns. Okay, you guys have probably seen the movie True Lies, where Jamie Lee Curtis drops a MAC-10 down the dang stairs, and what happens? It's tumbling down the stairs and going off and shooting in all different directions. And of course, all the rounds hit all the bad guys.
Of course.
Of course, and she's at the top of the stairs, but she doesn't get hit. just all of the bad guys get hit. So the whole runaway gun myth.
Sure.
So let's talk about that a bit.
Sure. So a lot of guns that will drop or are not drop safe rather, they can fire. Those guns exist even in some modern production guns, but generally speaking, it's not going to go full auto. Even if it's a auto capable gun, it'll be 1 or 2 rounds stop. It's not just going to run away like a belt fed would. So in that example, if that happened, it might discharge every time it impacted something, maybe, not always. But Hollywood definitely plays that up a good bit.
They do play it up a bit, and it's a very common myth. Basically, like if you take a Sten machine gun, World War II era Sten or whatever, and you bash it on the ground, it's going to go off every time you bash it because it's just the way the gun's designed. They're cheap, mass-produced guns, and they weren't really thinking about drop safety. They needed a weapon that was cheap to make and could be fielded easily and everything like that, and very little training required. The military doctrine, if we're out on the range and a belt-fed gun takes off, the military doctrine is to take the belt and twist it and break it and let it run until it's out of ammo. That's how you stop it. So runaway guns, yes, they happen, but in the way that Hollywood makes it out, definitely not very feasible at all.
No.
Okay.
Not.
Guns are very rarely going to shoot on their own without some type of human interaction. So that's a common myth. We thought we'd mention that.
Sure.
All right, number 3, cheap scopes suck.
All right, so this was
this is a good one.
This was my addition to the list. So here's kind of the thing. Cheap scopes, in terms of working or not, most of them will work as long as you're not playing with the turrets and you get it zeroed correctly and everything is Loctited and bolted down the way it should be. What tends to happen, people try dialing in on like a $99 scope. Good luck.
Or you go out and you perform a box test with a $99 scope and you're disappointed because it was slightly out of spec or didn't quite do what it was supposed to do. Guys, what a box test is basically what you'll do to perform a box test is you'll shoot a group, all right, you got your group, and then you'll adjust it over, down, back to the left, and back up. And in theory, if those adjustments track true, you're supposed to be able to be right back to square one. And then you also do the box test to the side, up, over to the right, back down. All the different directions, you'll box test it back and test for how well that scope tracks back to the original location. That's how you can tell the quality of turrets and how well it holds an adjustment. Yeah, if you're out trying to shoot a box test on a $99 scope, guys, it's probably going to fail the box test. But guess what? I've got a Ruger M77 over there that I've had since I was 18. It's just got a little BSA scope on it. Can't be a $79 scope.
If that.
I have never touched the adjustments on it. It's been sighted in since the day I had it. I've never touched it, and it's never had an issue. Never bumped out of adjustment. It always shoots exactly where I'm looking. And now, granted, I don't fiddle with the knobs, but as long as you set it and forget it and you're okay with that, the cheap scope is okay. A cheap scope does not suck.
And also, one thing I would also say is that cheap scopes are getting better every year. So 10 years ago, glass clarity was just atrocious on cheap scopes. Nowadays, it's pretty decent. The same thing as reticles are improving on cheaper scopes as well. So they're coming a long way, much more so than they used to be. The old rule of spending, twice on the glass that you did on your rifle, the gap is narrowing. There's still some differences, of course, in really expensive scopes. Absolutely, there are. They are nicer and better built, but you're getting more with the cheap scopes as long as you understand what you're getting. That's
absolutely true. And that old rule that you talked about really isn't in play that much anymore because some of the cost of some of these rifles has gone down a lot. So if you buy a Ruger American hunting rifle for, I don't know, $298, is that to say you have to put a $600 piece of glass on it? No. There's plenty of excellent scopes that can be had for easily south of $200 if you do your part.
Absolutely.
So that's something worth mentioning. All right, number 4, all ARs should be sub-minute.
All right. So this
is a good one.
This was another one of my suggestions. I get questions and comments about this all the time. Very recently, a viewer was saying that he thought his FN rifle, which was free-floated, wasn't getting good enough accuracy. And so I asked about the conditions, what he was shooting, and he said he was shooting PMC 55 grain ammo. So my reply to him, and not to be snarky, but it's just to think about it, is that if PMC 55 grain ammo all shot MOA, why would you buy match ammo? Why would it exist? Well, it exists because it tends to be more accurate and more consistent across the board than what you're going to get with just ball bulk ammo. So
pretty simple there.
Correct. You just Some ARs, even good ones, are going to shoot 1.5 minutes, even with good ammo and all the other conditions being correct. But for most people and most desires, it's going to do what you need it to do. There's very few applications that need better accuracy than that. So.
You know, I'm kind of a 62 grain ammo sort of guy when it comes to ARs. We were just discussing earlier, like I buy a lot of that Triple G Lithuanian surplus ammo. Now, it's been a little bit hard to get, but it's basically an unpainted SS-109 projectile, weighs 62 grains. You know, it's pretty much like, you know, military spec velocities that you would find on standard, you know, in M855 ammunition. It shoots great. It's consistent. I mean, Chad can keep, with a 16-inch AR, can shoot about a 12-inch group at 600 yards with it. So, okay, is it sub-minute? No, but can you keep a 30-round mag on a 12-inch plate at 600 yards?
It's hard.
Reading the wind? I mean, it really comes down to, do you need that sub-minute accuracy? I mean, can you shoot sub? Well, we'll get into that. All right, so let's move on. But I think that's an excellent answer. I mean, I've never really found 55 grain ammo to be what I would consider extremely accurate. It's more for plinking, close range work, training. I wouldn't consider 55 grain a serious option for trying to shoot tiny groups.
And I would say it depends.
62s tend to do better.
It depends on the barrel too. Every barrel's its unique animal.
Yep.
Some of them prefer lighter, some of them prefer heavier. It's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, we bought some of those ion bond coated 18-inch match grade barrels from BCM, and I'm a big fan of that particular barrel. And you know, sometimes a round that my gun likes, Chad's build may not like, and it's the same barrel, same company, but sometimes each barrel kind of is going to tell you what it sort of likes. You have to kind of discover that. So
absolutely, don't
give up, guys. If you got an AR that doesn't shoot sub-minute, don't worry. It doesn't mean that it's a bad AR. It just means you haven't found the right combination of stuff. Or maybe you need to practice more. I mean, sometimes it just happens too. All right, number 5, operator headspace. Now, we've done a gripe about this concept in its entirety. We've done an entire gripe about operator headspace, but I feel it belongs in the gun myth category because a lot of people really tend to say, oh, well, this gun's not accurate, or man, I don't like this scope, I don't like this optic, I don't like this, I don't like that component, when really it just comes down to something they're not doing right. Either they didn't read the manual, or there's something they're doing wrong, or they're not feeding it the appropriate spec ammunition. There's something going on that is their fault, and they're blaming the tool and not them as the user.
Sure.
And that happens a lot.
And one thing that's great, you know, about channels like Eric's and what I try to bring to it as well is just there's so much information about the different variables that could go into that out there on different channels from folks that know what they're talking about. As the operator in this case, it's kind of incumbent on you to seek that information out if you want to find the solution, right? So you can sit around and just be frustrated and say your gun won't shoot or whatever, but if you're not researching all the different components that go into that and then analyzing how your gun's set up and also how you're shooting it, then it's probably operator headspace and timing rather than the actual machinery.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the next one, which is process of elimination, assessing failures. Now, this is not really so much a myth as much as it is that people just basically fail at this big time. You know, knowing how to properly use the process of elimination to logically assess something that's going on with your gun. Okay, well, I take my gun out. It's supposed to be a gun that's guaranteed 1 minute accuracy out of the box. I take it out, it's shooting 2.5 minutes. All right, what's going on here? Okay, is the scope level? Are the rings lapped? Is the scope making good contact? Are the screws torqued down to appropriate spec on the mount? Is the mount tight? Did something work loose? Is the barrel nut loose? Is the whatever? Any amount of things. Is the muzzle device loose? The muzzle device, those gases can expand in a variety of different directions as it becomes untimed and can cause your point of impact to shift. And you're thinking, man, what the heck? Why isn't this thing grouping? And it's just simple little things that can ruin your day at the range. That is just, if you just take the time to understand that is a mechanical object.
It can fail. And he brought up a good point there, and we didn't even discuss this off camera, but muzzle devices, right? So one thing I see now that you didn't see 10 years ago is with the advent of like eBay and a lot of CNC shops out there, they'll make, especially it tends to be brakes, at least from what I've seen, that aren't symmetrical. So what'll happen is they didn't really do any testing of it, and the gas, as it exits the muzzle, is going with different forces. Well, that force imparts force onto the bullet as it exits the muzzle, so it can really do crazy things to your accuracy. So I'll have guys send me pictures of their gun, and I'll have this like Wazoo crazy muzzle brake that they got off eBay.
And it looks cool.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm like, just try it with the A2, you know, that came with your rifle, and oftentimes that will fix the issue. So
right.
Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Those expanding gases, the muzzle of a barrel is very, very crucial to good accuracy. You know, a lot of these barrels will put 11-degree target crown, a nice smooth surface. You'll notice the muzzle of the barrel is also very smooth and very even and very well machined and fitted, because as those gases expand, they could impart a partial amount of force on the base of that bullet and cause it to move just a little bit. You're not going to be able to tell as a shooter, but the groups down range can definitely give you an indication as to what's going on, especially if you have groups that string. Yeah. Like you might, okay, on a horizontal plane, the rounds are like, if you could just smush that group together, man, that's awesome. But you're getting some horizontal stringing. That could be a sign of your barrel touching the stock. It could be the gases expanding funky at the muzzle. It could be anything. But using the process of elimination and assessing the failures will go a long way. And the myth there is people go, oh, well, this just, I'm going to sell this gun because it just don't shoot. It's right. The gun. And they don't blame the total package. They just blame, all right, well, that gun doesn't shoot.
Yep, absolutely. So somebody brought out an old Colt SP-01 to my range, and he was telling me that he couldn't hit anything with it. Well, I loaded it up with, I think it was Freedom Munitions, 55 grain reman, and with iron sight, shot a 3-inch group with it. So for that combo, and he was telling me he couldn't hit anything. He's like, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. I was like, well, that shoots pretty well. And he was kind of like, oh.
It happens, guys. It happens. But assess the failure, use the process of elimination. Chad and I are going to make a separate video on this concept where we talk about the process you go through to assess something that's going on with your rig. So that we'll make a video helping you guys out with that one. All right. Number 7, sub-minute, a new standard. So this is it's not a myth, but it is a commonly thrown around term. Oh, well, is it sub-minute? You know what I mean? Like that gets thrown around all the time. Like, is it sub-minute? You know, my response is, can you shoot sub-minute? I mean,
and also, what is sub-minute? So is sub-minute a 3-shot group, a 5-shot group, a 10-shot group? It depends who you ask. You know, if you watch like extreme bench rest competitors, the guys that are like bolting their rigs down, I mean, those guys are shooting 10-shot groups and trying to get them in the size of a dime, right? Whereas someone like me, I'm out at the range shooting a 5-shot group. If it'll do an inch with me behind it in real-world environmental conditions, I'm good with it. You know, in some cases, even if it won't, I'm still good with it, depending, again, on the conditions that we see. So
when I hear the term sub-minute, what I think of a gun that is capable of pretty good feats of accuracy. If you can get a gun to shoot under a minute, that's great. Okay, look, can you shoot a gun consistently into a sub-minute? That is the question. I mean, to have a gun that is capable, yes, I have a Remington 5R that is well capable of shooting sub-minute. Absolutely. Can I shoot it sub-minute consistently? On a good day, maybe. Sure. Can Chad get behind it and shoot a half-inch group? Absolutely. He can. Can he do it consistently? Maybe not always. But is the gun capable of doing it? Oh, you better believe it. So sub-minute is the standard. Can you shoot sub-minute?
Sure.
That's the question.
And just on that note, so I shoot more now than I did at pretty much any period in my life. And I'm blessed to be able to do that. I'm sure Eric's kind of in the same boat. So, you know, 15 years ago, could I shoot as well as I can shoot now? No, I couldn't, right? That's an honest assessment. And it's because I have the opportunity now through my channel and some other things to be able to shoot a lot. And there's really no substitute for that range time and getting it in every week over and over again. So it builds skills for sure. So just because maybe honest assessment, you can't do it, doesn't mean that you can't do it if you put in the work. So, you know, if you want to, absolutely put in the work, get the right equipment, and it will happen. Now,
if you know a guy that shoots sub-minute all the time with his favorite bolt gun and then gets behind a, I don't know, Remington SPS with a Hogue stock and it shoots a minute and a half, well, then guess what? Right. That gun probably ain't going to shoot better than that, because if that guy normally shoots half-inch groups, sure, and now the gun you hand him shoots inch groups or inch and a half, it's probably the gun. Right. So you put a good shooter behind a gun, you're going to, you know, nothing's going to hide there. So that's something we thought was worth mentioning. All right. And this kind of is along the same line. We won't spend a lot of time on this one. The gun's not accurate. All right. The myth of, man, this gun won't shoot, something's wrong, it's just not shooting worth the crap. The gun's not accurate. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, because it's just, I hate doing that, and I don't want to talk about somebody that's not here, but let's just say, I'm going to pick a little fun at my buddy. You know, he's my friend. I'm not going to mention his name specifically because I don't want to call him out. But, you know, a buddy of mine handed me a gun the other day. He's like, yeah, you know, it was shooting like pie plate size group at 15, 20 yards. It was a handgun. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe, you know. So I got behind it, took my time, and shot like an inch group with it. You know, so sometimes it's just maybe like I'm used to that particular gun a little more than he is, or maybe it's just that I shoot that style of gun a little more. Sure. And I was able to shoot it extremely accurately. And you could tell he was kind of like surprised, like, wow, like the gun's not accurate, but yet it is. So it's just like sometimes it just the shooter may not be used to the gun or something like that. And it can, yeah, the gun may not shoot as good as it potentially can. I mean, that's why for handguns we have things like ransom rest.
Sure.
Okay, ransom rest removes all the human variables. If I put a gun, a revolver, like a nice revolver, in a ransom rest, and I shoot groups, and it's only going to shoot, let's just say, an inch group at 20 yards. And guess what? A human ain't going to be able to shoot it no better than that ransom rest. So to say the gun's not accurate, unless you've actually ransom rest that gun or hard rest it or done any type of thing to remove all the human variable from the equation, you can't say the gun's not accurate unless you've actually done the work to determine if it is indeed the gun and not you, the shooter.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So
100%. Nothing really I can get into besides what we're about to talk about, which is the next point on that.
Yeah. Now Chad and I, and well, we were all sitting around kind of coming up with this list, and Chad had some arguments to make towards this too, which I do agree with Chad a bit. All right. You need an aftermarket trigger.
Sure. So I have a video planned completely on this subject where I'm going to try to set out some metrics to give people a guideline. So it's going to vary, but a good example is a Smith & Wesson Shield, right? So it's a very popular gun. It's huge. I carry it all the time. Big fan of the Shields. But a lot of people will say, oh, the trigger sucks. It's terrible. But for me, I think the trigger's great and perfectly usable. I've never actually installed any aftermarket triggers in any of my M&Ps because for me, they do what I need them to do with me behind it. So I think something I've seen just working with different people now in the gun industry is one thing I've seen is folks who grew up with double action revolvers are the best shooters across the board in terms of trigger control. So somebody who grew up with a 12-pound double action long pull and that's how they learned how to shoot, they really had to focus on those fundamentals. So you hand them something like a Shield that has a real small movement relatively and a 7-pound trigger, they're gonna be like, man, this trigger's awesome. It's so easy to shoot what I want. But if you get somebody who grew up with like, I don't know, an AR with a Geissele trigger in it, right, and then hand them that Shield or that Glock with a factory trigger, they won't know how to
Their
work.
definition of a good trigger is going to be slightly different than a guy who grew up shooting double single action or whatever. Or even 1911s now.
Sure.
Some guy grew up shooting, you know, some people grew up shooting nice single action 1911s. Now, granted, 1911 triggers, military ones, maybe not so great, but, you know, you can get some awesome triggers in 1911. So if that's what you're used to, and you pick up a striker fire polymer frame gun, you might go, what is this crap? Like, it might feel like a staple gun to you. So do you need an aftermarket trigger? Some people are quick to like buy a given gun and then immediately go order aftermarket trigger, aftermarket spring kit, aftermarket stuff, and then go, all right, man, this gun's just going to shoot so much better without even giving the original components a chance to know. So how will they know what marked improvement they made if they didn't even like accept some form of record of what the original components would do?
And also,
how do you know what you've improved?
Absolutely. And one thing too is that if your triggers are so nice and you always have these fancy aftermarket triggers, sometimes they can hide some things that need work in your shooting technique, right? So I find that. So 1911 is a perfect example. I happen to have a Wilson Combat 1911 and the trigger's just, it's insane. It's so nice. And when I shoot that, I mean, I can kind of get away with slapping the trigger a little bit. I can do things that if I did it on, say, a Glock or an M&P, I would see it.
You see the rounds pulling.
You'd see it downrange much more so than you do on that Wilson because the Wilson trigger is just so nice that it lets you do the wrong thing. So if that's all you do, you may develop a habit of it.
I think the point there also is that a guy that gets used to using some fancy aftermarket trigger and you hand him a standard, just regular working man's gun, and then all of a sudden you find that you can't even perform with just your basic everyday gun because you're so used to all the fancy pants stuff. So guys, don't ever turn down an opportunity to get to know every type of weapon system well. I mean, if you like aftermarket triggers, great, but know how to shoot on a standard trigger too.
Sure.
All right, and that goes on to the next one. This is the last one. This one's called the Aftermarket Wonder. Parentheses, guns that don't work. So this is a problem that we run into quite a bit. Now this was kind of one of my ideas here is Aftermarket Wonder. So Chad had this Glock 17 that we did the meltdown on, and it fared really well. It was a standard 17 with a full auto Glock plate in it. that we have, borrowed from Quiet Riot up there to do the meltdown with. Anyway, that particular gun, he went and put like aftermarket trigger and all these aftermarket components, springs, all this stuff, aftermarket barrel, aftermarket this, all this stuff, to the point where by the time you're done, there ain't nothing left on it that says Glock except for the frame.
Right.
You can change out all this stuff. But one thing I found, with the exception of very few companies that do aftermarket work, unless they know what they're doing, you really have a humongous loss in reliability, and that is a huge issue. That reliability really goes downhill. Chad put all that crap in his Glock, and what happened? Constant stoppages, issues. It wasn't reliable anymore.
Sure.
So sure, you get those marked improvements on performance that you're like, oh wow, that trigger's great, or man, this is smooth and all that smooth. But what is the cost of all that worth if the gun's not reliable anymore?
Absolutely. And one thing that's really good about having access to YouTube these days is on YouTube there's a lot of trainers that do videos, and I find those guys to be a wealth of information, because what they see week in and week out is people coming in with different guns, different components, what works, what doesn't, through typically 5 to 100, or rather 500 to through 1,000 rounds. So they see it every day, day in and day out, different environmental conditions. So watching guys like that, like Larry Vickers, Aaron over at Sage Dynamics, there's plenty other, John, the Warrior Poet Society, watching those guys, seeing what they recommend, it's so much better than even I could have, or just Eric, because we have our small set that we see, but it's our stuff. It's sample sizes of 1. They see sample sizes of 100. So check those guys out if you're interested in what works and what doesn't. But there definitely are some proven aftermarket stuff, and then some other stuff that I would probably only put on a gun that was for the range only, and probably not trust for my life. So there's certain brands out there. One, I'll just say it off the top of my head, that I recommend constantly to my viewers is, like for ARs, is Geissele, right? There's other AR triggers that are really good. They're awesome. None of them have the proven track record. In my experience, again, that Geissele does.
Ton of military guys use the Geissele stuff. And another thing to look at, and I will end the video on this note.
Sure.
I know we're kind of getting a little bit long on this, but there was our 10 gun myths that hopefully we broke down for you. The one thing I'll leave you with, though, is also look at the 3-gun circuit, what the guys are running in disciplines like 3-gun, because 3-gun will tell you what's going to break and what's not. So sometimes look at what the aftermarket stuff that some of the top 3-gun shooters are running, because if that's working for them and they're setting records and they're winning and it's holding together and they're getting through entire matches without having something break, then what does that tell you? I mean, the Army Marksmanship Unit has a 3-gun team, and really they go around and they do a whole bunch of shooting. But what do you think they're really, they're competing, but what else do you think they're doing? They're collecting data. They're finding out what works. They're talking to people. Hey, why do you like this? So it's a networking thing for them to be able to talk to some of these shooters and figure out what is working and what's not. So there is a tactical advantage to even attending 3-gun matches, because you get to talk to all your fellow competitors who are all perfectly willing to share information with you. Because it's such a cool sport. Everybody's real close, and they love to help each other. So that is a wealth of information to learn from other shooters, especially in disciplines like 3-gun, because it is so taxing on the equipment. So that's something to consider.
AME is another good source. Thank you for pointing that out. They have a YouTube channel where they do instructional videos. I subscribe to it, and they also do discuss gear in a lot of those. So it is a very good resource.
Some of the Army Marksmanship.
They do. It's a very good resource.
And there's some really good shooters on that team. They're really good dudes.
World class.
Of course.
Shooters.
Of course. So, guys, thanks for watching today's video. We just wanted to bring some of these up. It's always a pleasure having Mike down here on the channel. Anytime we get together, we always try to, come up. Well, it's actually the first time we've had him down to actually film with us specifically. So we're hoping that this can be a somewhat regular thing, and we can have Mike on the channel. Make sure you check his channel out. He's a good dude. Tons of great things that he does on his channel. And you'll be seeing me lurking around on his channel here and there. And guys, thanks for watching today's Gripe. We have many more on the way. Thanks for coming down, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been watching this channel, waiting to get down here for years.
That's one thing I will say. Mike has always been a just tremendous supporter of the channel. If you look at any number of our older videos, you'll always see Guns and Gear, Mr. Guns and Gear, Mr. Guns and Gear. He's always commenting. He's always got really cool things to say. So it's really neat to have him down here, because he's watched our channel for so long, and then just to see the success of his channel, and then now we're finally together, it's really cool. So guys, we hope you enjoyed it. We love doing crossovers. Thank you for watching today's video. We'll see you next time.